Hi guys, it's Miss Howell. We're going to move on to Module 7 now. This is the nervous system, and today we're just going to talk about neurons and neuroglia, the cells of the nervous system. Got some definitions for you to learn, but first let's go through a little bit of review from Module 5. Fill in your blanks with the red words and look for stars as we go along. You might want to go through the slides once and just pause as you need to and fill in the blanks, and then go back through it again after you've gotten all your blanks filled in, and just listen as I talk, and that time look for the stars and highlight. The video is going to be right at 15 minutes today. All right, so the review that I needed you to look at for Module 5, that was back when we talked about muscles, and we were discussing the motor unit in a muscle action, and the motor unit included the nerve as well as the muscle fiber. So we kind of introduced the nervous system back then, and you're going to learn a lot more about it this week and next week, and hopefully these 10 steps will make a lot more sense then. But let's go through these 10 steps right now really quickly, just as a quick review. So number 1, the action potential moves from the brain down the axon of a motor neuron. ACH, or acetylcholine, is released from the presynaptic terminal, and then ACH can travel across the synaptic cleft. And then step 4, that ACH begins to interact with the muscle fiber membrane to create a muscle action potential. Step 5, that muscle action potential travels down a T-tubule into the cell. Number 6, that allows calcium ions to be released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Number 7, those calcium ions bind to the troponin in an actin filament, allowing myosin heads to grab onto the actin. Number 8, all together the myosin then pull to create the power stroke. That's a contraction. And then ATP energy binds to the myosin heads, forcing them to release the active sites on actin, and then the myosin heads pull back to ready themselves so they can start this process all over again in the return stroke. All right, so let's move on now to discuss the nervous system. Actually, there's 2 nervous systems in the human body. There's the central nervous system, or CNS, which is composed of your brain and your spinal cord. These components are all encased in bone for protection. And then we have the peripheral nervous system, or PNS, which consists of all your external nerves and ganglia. So let's define those 2 terms. A nerve is a bundle of axons and their sheaths, which extend out from the central nervous system. Ganglia are a collection of neuron cell bodies that are outside the central nervous system. So you're not going to find any ganglia within the brain. All right, moving on to some more definitions. And there's a lot of things that appear in pairs throughout the next several slides. So just kind of follow along with these. So there are 2 different kinds of nerves. You have spinal nerves and cranial nerves. The spinal nerves are those that originate from your spinal cord. Your cranial nerves are those that originate within the brain. Your PNS is further broken down into 2 divisions. You have the afferent division, or afferent neurons. These are the neurons which transmit action potential from the sensory organ, moving to the central nervous system. It's also called your sensory division. So the afferent is the sensory division. And then the efferent division, or efferent neurons, these are the neurons which transmit action potential from the central nervous system to the effector organ, such as the motor division. We'll talk about that in class, so it'll make more sense for you. The efferent motor division can be divided into 2 sections. You have a somatic motor nervous system from the central nervous system to your skeletal muscles. This is fully voluntary. I can think and tell myself I would like to lift my spoon to my mouth, and that's a voluntary movement that causes the bicep muscle to flex and pulls my hand into my mouth. The autonomic nervous system from the central nervous system goes to your smooth muscles and your cardiac muscles and your glands, and it's completely involuntary. I don't think, okay, heart, I need you to beat now. It's a constant involuntary action. The brain sends the signal, but I don't have to think about the signal, and it moves the cardiac muscles and causes my heart to pump. Also, the glands to secrete different hormones or saliva or other substances. All right, the autonomic nervous system can be further divided into two divisions. You have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The sympathetic division prepares your body for physical activity. It increases your heart rate. It raises your blood pressure. It causes an increase in adrenaline for quick energy for that fight or flight response when you get scared or angry. The parasympathetic division is the opposite. It regulates your resting and your nutrition-related functions like digestion, defecation, and urination. So this is the side of your autonomic nervous system. Again, it's involuntary, that lowers your blood pressure, lowers your heart rate, causes you to secrete tears, saliva, causes the smooth muscles of your stomach to churn and aid in digesting your meals. So what's a neuron? A neuron is simply just a nerve cell. The animal cells you probably studied and diagrammed in your basic biology course looked very different than a neuron, though they do contain a lot of the same parts. However, a neuron consists of three fundamental parts. There's the cell body, the axon, and the dendrites. Within the cell body, the neuron has its nucleus. There's lots of mitochondria and multiple Golgi apparatuses. These organelles allow the neuron to create lots of energy in the form of ATP and neurotransmitters like acetylcholine that are going to be secreted by the cell. From the cell body, we've said already that neuron has axons and dendrites. Axons take action potential away from the cell body. Dendrites always bring messages to the cell body. Interestingly, the neurons in your body reached maturity shortly after infancy, right around the age of 4, and those cells will never ever undergo mitosis. That means that if they're damaged, they are not replaced. Some are destroyed automatically, and that's according to God's original plan. Because of his plan, it's estimated that humans have over 100 billion, with a B, neurons. But when you do things that artificially destroy your neurons against his plan, like the use of excessive alcohol or illicit drugs, this will upset God's plan, and it leaves you with damage to your nervous system that will never be repaired. All right, so neurons are classified based on the number of processes or extensions that they have. Axons and dendrites are those processes. They're the things that kind of hang off of the cell body. No matter how many processes a single neuron has, it will only have one axon. So there's 3 different types here in this classification of the number of processes. The first one is unipolar. The unipolar neuron, look at the one in the center diagram, figure B. In that one, the cell body hangs, let's see if I can find it, right here. This is the cell body, there's the nucleus, and it kind of hangs off the side away from this axon. The axon carries signals away from the body, and the dendrites, which are these up here, are actually in reality called pseudodendrites. So the pseudodendrites carry the signal toward the cell body. Afferent or sensory neurons are usually unipolar. Bipolar, this one here, figure A, as its name suggests, has 2 processes. An axon on one side that moves away, and a single dendrite on the other side that moves to the cell body, but that dendrite is usually branched into multiple individual branches off of the single dendrite. Specialized afferent neurons, like those that carry information from the eyes to the brain, are bipolar. And then lastly, we have the multipolar neuron. This type of neuron has many processes that extend from the cell body. But remember, only out of all of these, only one is going to be an axon. Multipolar neurons are usually either efferent, which is the motor neurons, or they're association neurons. And an association neuron is found in the brain. It's a neuron that conducts action potentials from one neuron to another within the central nervous system. Though we're focusing on neurons, we also need to discuss another type of cell in the nervous system. These are called neuroglia or neural glue. These are cells that act like connective tissue for your nervous system. Actually, most of the cells in the nervous system are neuroglia. We stated earlier that neurons don't undergo mitosis, but have you ever heard of somebody who has gotten a brain tumor? Well, tumors, by definition, are just masses of cells that have undergone uncontrollable growth. But how is that possible if neurons don't multiply? Well, tumors are formed from masses of these special neuroglia cells. It's not the neurons that have formed a tumor, it's neuroglia. All right, this is where I'm going to need you to pause this on your own and look over each of these different types of cells. Notice there's a star at the top. Pay really good attention to this ependymal cell and look in your book because actually there's two types of ependymal cells. They're found in the central nervous system, not in the peripheral nervous system, so you'll find them in the brain and the spinal cord. The two types that are found of the ependymal, some have cilia, these little projections, and some are without cilia. And they're basically working to produce cerebrospinal fluid. So they're producing a fluid and putting that out around to bathe the brain in that liquid. The ones with the cilia help move the fluid around. You also have microglia that help to remove waste and toxins by phagocytosis. We'll talk a little bit about that in class, but it's also only in the central nervous system, as are astrocytes, which maintain a blood-brain barrier. We'll talk about that as well, and how chemotherapy drugs can sometimes pass that blood-brain barrier. And then oligodendrocytes are other cells of the neuroglia that are only in the central nervous system. The ones that I want you to pay attention to for the peripheral nervous system are the Schwann cells, and we'll talk a little bit more about Schwann cells later as well. But I want you to pause, look at the bullet points here, and make sure you understand these, and then we'll move on. As we mentioned, a neuron is just a single nerve cell, but a nerve is a bundle of axons and their surrounding sheaths that extend from the central nervous system. If you were to look directly at a living nerve in a human body, and if we get to go back to the cadaver lab, we'll get to see them, they're going to appear shiny and white. This is because they're wrapped in a layer of collagen, and that collagen layer is called the epineurium. That's this outside covering around a single nerve, and a nerve, remember, is a bundle of axons. The epineurium wraps several bundles, and each individual bundle, this is a bundle here, this is another bundle here, these are called fascicles. The fascicles each are wrapped, the outer covering of a fascicle is wrapped in its perineurium. And when you get to the individual cells here, they are also wrapped in the endoneurium as well as their Schwann cells. Does that sound familiar? The endoneurium, perineurium, epineurium? Well, it should, because that's exactly what we studied with the muscle cells from Module 5, except instead of calling them, say, perineurium, it was perimysium, endomysium, and epimysium. Mys meaning muscle, neur meaning neural or nervous system, nerves. Throughout the body, your nerves tend to travel along with your blood vessels. And just as blood vessels vary in size, like your arteries and capillaries and veins are all different sizes, so do nerves. The thickest nerve in your body is the sciatic nerve, which is about as thick as your index finger. That's pretty big. If you look down at your index finger and imagine there's a bundle of nervous cells that extend from your spine down the back of your buttock and leg, and it's as big around as your index finger. Remember, each neuron is just a one-way street. The nerves are classified as sensory, motor, or mixed. A sensory nerve sends incoming messages like taste, touch, and sight to the brain. Motor nerves send outgoing messages to the muscles for a response. And then the mixed carry axons that go in both directions. One final discussion before we go. We've said that neurons don't undergo mitosis, so how can we replace old ones when we die or when they die? How does a person heal? We'll talk about that in class. Save that, and we'll talk about that in our discussion when you come in on Monday.